Hello and welcome to Driven by Doing. Today we have got Peter Escobar with us. Hey Peter, welcome to the show Driven by Doing.
Hey Venki, how's it going today?
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on to our show and to share a lot of great advice for students. And especially, I'm super impressed with your background. So I can't wait to get started with the podcast today. So I've seen you have done your bachelor's back in DePaul University, and you got a degree in psychology. And I really wanted to, curious to know how did you transition from being a psychology student to a career coach? How did you find your passion, Peter?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question.
Yeah.
So when I was in college, I actually had no idea what I wanted to do.
Mm.
And I considered a lot of different career fields. I looked at like IT accounting, but I never really saw myself in those spaces. And kind of knowing that I wanted to do some work on behalf of like racial equity. Psychology was a good major to get me started on that path. Because it was probably about my midway point through college that I realized I could work at a nonprofit and kind of like was exploring like what that is and what that meant. So I was like, psychology is a good degree to get me there. So I chose that, and then I decided, right, if I wanted to build on that degree later, I could, or if there was something else I wanted to do after I got a little more work experience, I could also, pursue those passions, and kind of like that's what I did.
That's amazing. So, you talk about racial equity and such an engage when you're an advocate for racial equity. What does that really mean to you? Because a lot of people, I mean, we are seeing a lot of things that are going on in and around us. And what does it mean to you? And how do you really see what do we need to do to bring a change all around us?
That's a big
Yeah.
question. Yeah, for me, I think racial equity. Well, growing up in Chicago, like right, I grew up in a predominantly like Puerto Rican community that was at the time like being gentrified. It just completely gentrified now, and kind of like my first kind of like step into that world was kind of like seeing this displacement of like brown peoples, and then kind of learning more about like the displacement of like Black and brown peoples and the way in which they're held back. We're held back, I should say, in like certain spaces. So for me, it was how do I build a career out of trying to empower like Black and brown folks to do all that they can and like recognize the systems that are oppressing them and strategize on how to like navigate those systems so they can overcome those systems. So that's just kind of my initial thoughts. I kind of like that's what it means for me. And then I think for change, like right, like kind of mentioning the systemic injustices that are happening right now. I think we need to look at this from a higher systems level and think like what can we do within like ourselves, within like our organizations, within our companies, within like our city, within our country to like bring about these changes. Because unless like the system change, then for the most part, it's just going to be people navigating those systems.
Wow, wow. I mean, thanks for giving that whole background because it's very interesting to see, from different perspectives. Because that experience, bringing up in a small community, I think that really helped you to have that vision of what it really means to you. And thanks for sharing that with our audience today. And again, coming to your current experience, you started off working with nonprofits, and you already started working with a couple of nonprofits so far in your career, starting off with the Center for Changing Lives, and
Mm-hmm.
currently working at Youth Job Center in Chicago. And you help a lot of students regularly, and you connect with people who really needed a lot of support, especially from the diverse backgrounds. So, what are some of the common challenges that you see students, especially from those backgrounds, uh, need help and support with?
Yeah, so like one of the things that I do at the Youth Job Center currently is working with folks in addition to career advising, like with some financial coaching. So looking at like work as a financial goal and kind of like realizing like what that means. especially for like the young people, I think there is this just lack of information about kind of finances and things like credit, like things that haven't traditionally been taught in school that really affect like a lot of their lives. So for me, it's like, that's, I think like the biggest thing I see is like, right, like this lack of information and like, right, to some degree, some kind of like fear around like dealing with finances based on like family history with finances. So I would say that is definitely like one of like the common things that I see. In addition to, I think I like sometimes it's just like a lack of confidence and like working with young people to kind of build up that confidence so they can recognize that they are capable of like achieving like whatever their goals are. I think oftentimes as well, like young people kind of have like that big goal in mind and it seems so unattainable. So it's really working with them to break down like what those goals kind of look like and make those into smaller, more manageable goals, and like laying out a timeline so they can really see like when they can achieve those goals.
Wow. Again, like, having that big vision and breaking it down into small, simple goals, because that's super important. Because for small young kids or who are just getting out of college, who are trying to get out there and like, see what it's like, it's overwhelming. And sometimes taking those small, tiny steps, it's super important. And you helping break down their vision into small, tiny goals, because I mean, we need to start small. And sometimes we get overwhelmed when we look at the whole task ahead of us, and sometimes we don't realize, hey, like, everybody, it's the same feeling for everybody. And sometimes we feel that, hey, like, they were born out of a silver spoon, or like, it's for everybody, it's the same uh, flat surface, I guess. And you have to start somewhere, and that's what I truly believe in, making those bigger visions into small, tiny goals and working your way through each and every day. And I think it's really helping those anger students at that early age, to make them and assure them that it is achievable. And sometimes just sharing stories, how other people have achieved, and how they can achieve too. It's as simple as that. And sometimes access to information, you rightly mentioned that a lot of students, or like, even adults, sometimes like, you see a lot of people struggling with their financial stuff. And a lot of times the lack of education, and because we were not being taught uh, what are those key simple things that actually make the world run, right? So I mean, we might have a lot of great degrees and a lot of we might go to a lot of great schools, but those are the key things that sometimes lack of knowledge, or the lack of awareness, I would say, that really is lagging behind like a lot of us. So I think great job on like, sharing what that looks like, and really breaking down those goals for them to like, take action. So again, coming back to the next question, you mentioned about like, what are the key challenges for students, especially at that young age, getting the financial goals or financial education. And recently, Youth Job Center has partnered with CareerQuo. Like, we are so proud to actually like help a lot of students at Youth Job Center, and bringing technology to people who really need it is our mission at CareerQuo. And we are super proud that we were able to partner with Youth Job Center. So what does that mean to you? And like, any technology can really help, especially people, those who needed it the most. So how do you think technology can enable people, especially during this, the whole world has changed quite a bit in the last 6 months, last 6 months. So what does it mean to you, and how do you think the technology can be leveraged to make sure that everybody having the right access?
Yeah, I think that is a really good question. And right, like I think we're already kind of seeing some of the ways in which like we can use like technology to still stay connected like during this time. Like right, like you mentioned, COVID-19 has kind of changed everything. So right, like still being able to connect with clients is something that like right, like 30 years ago we wouldn't be able to do. Would be all kind of phone calls, and we lose this kind of like face-to-face like interaction. And I think that's especially valuable at Youth Job Center for like the younger or the youth that we're serving, because like part of like any kind of like social work is like building that relationship like with the people that we're working with. So I am just like really appreciative of CareerQuo and any kind of technology that allows us to stay connected with our young people, as well as it also kind of gives us this new advantage of being right in front of a screen and being able to like share your screen with a young person, right? We can then go on, if they have a question, we can say, let me look that up for you. And rather than us both trying to be physically there looking at one screen, they can see their screen, that we can like find that information that they're looking for, or direct them like right to like whatever website or whatever resources that they may need. So like, I think like one example of the way in which we're kind of using like technology at Youth Job Center is we have some workshops that we've been hosting. Most recently in May, we hosted a workshop on how to apply for unemployment to get some young people engaged, because like a lot of folks, like our young people were losing their jobs and needed that income coming in. So we were able to kind of like use technology to kind of like get them engaged and like give them that skill. So I think that kind of going into this, right, like no one was really prepared to be in a pandemic, but there are some good things that have come out of it. And again, like I think it's one of the ways to, or one of the things that came out of it was just this use of technology. And I would also say in addition to that, like, right, like the ability to use technology has potentially expanded our reach to the people that we can serve. Because before, right, our if you couldn't really get to like one of our offices, we didn't really work with you because we really didn't have that platform to work with you. But now that's completely different. I know there are some young folks who just need help with like resume support that are in some of the further suburbs that we're able to connect to and like get them that support. So that's been great.
Wow, wow. I think, again, a great job to Youth Job Center and many nonprofits that are really helping folks who needed the most support during this time. And as you mentioned, like, you know, it's a lot of people are losing jobs, and it's very tough and challenging out there. And thanks for everything that you guys are doing at Youth Job Center. So, what are some of those like top 3 tips that you would tell for anybody who is looking for a job, especially during this challenging times? Like, you know, what are those common tips that you see that's working? I think, like, you know, since we are almost like, you know, 6 months in, especially for COVID-19, what are some of those tips that you think that are really helping students?
Yeah, so 3 common tips. I would say the first one would be, if you have a job interview lined up, I can't stress enough how useful it is to practice with somebody. Even if it is like your mom, your brother, your sister, your friend. If you can't practice with somebody in person, if you can like video chat them and the ability to practice that way. I think people often like, right, like some folks will prepare for interviews, you know, by just kind of going over questions in their head. But there is a use of having like another person there to kind of listen to what you're saying, and somebody who's going to be really like open and honest with you and be like, that doesn't really make sense, or I wouldn't say that there, is super useful. The second would be to kind of similarly like review your resume and have somebody else like look it over for you. I can speak from personal experience. I'm the king of typos. So whenever I do something, I have to have somebody else like proofread it for me. Because there are just some common typos that I always make that I will never catch, but somebody else will always catch them. So even if it's just like having somebody review it to make sure that all your spelling and grammar is correct, like remembering that employers are really like looking at that, and that there are a lot of candidates out there right now. So you want to make sure that your application stands out. And the third tip I would say would be, you know, being open to rejection, which can be hard. Like, right, remembering that the job search is like full of a lot of rejection, and trying not to take it too personally. Like, right, something that I encourage like young people to do after they have a job interview is just go do something for themselves. Whether that's just kind of like sit in the park, go for a bike ride, do whatever they can to just kind of like de-stress. Like an interview for most folks is a really stressful experience. So I think it's important to just take some time for yourself after that and kind of be okay with a no, but remembering that that no doesn't end your job search, and that can just be fuel for you to continue looking for a job.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing those great tips because I think one, like you mentioned how important it is to like take a break. Sometimes it is overwhelming like when you start looking for jobs, and if you do not have one, and it can be so overwhelming that you wanted it desperately, and sometimes those burnouts are real, applying for as many jobs as possible and pushing ourselves to that limits. And I think really great work and sharing those tips. So when you see students applying for more and more jobs, one of the common things that I hear when talking to lots of students is getting feedback. Right, when you apply for a job and you don't get an offer, however, at least I think most of the students are looking for feedback. Like, how can I improve? What I did wrong? And what are those common areas that I'm doing common mistakes every single time? Because like a lot, I mean, again, on the HR side as well, it's kind of overwhelming, and there are going to be hundreds of applicants for every single job. So in those cases, what are some tips that you can share with students who are listening, or even professionals, when they're applying for jobs and not getting enough feedback to improve? What are some of the things that they can usually do, whether to approach them and ask for feedback, or because what are some of those tips around that?
Yeah, so I think in terms of getting feedback from an employer, I think one of the important things to do is initially after that first job interview, whenever you have that, is to remember to send a thank you note. It's a thing that most folks, I think, can forget to do. And I would say no matter what the job is, like making sure you're getting the business card or contact information for the person interviewing you, just to get that email to say, thank you so much for taking the time to interview me. I really appreciate it. And then maybe saying a little something about that interview, because I think that sets you up for more success later if they reach out to you and say you didn't get the job. And then I think you can then, it's easier to reach out and say I'm sure you made the right choice. Is there any way I can get some feedback? And it's that same thing, right? I think you mentioned, you just mentioned it, employers are getting hundreds of applications for one position, and they're trying to fill those positions. So it's also being okay with, getting that no there, or just not receiving an answer. And remembering too that there are organizations like Youth Jobs or other workforce development organizations that you can work with to help you out in terms of getting that feedback if you're not getting that from employers directly. But I would say, yeah, that initial thank you email is extremely important.
Wow, again, great tip. The thank you note. I mean, there are so many examples that I heard when people might not get that job that they applied today, but just that thank you note, or just that being appreciative of their time can really help you some way or the other. Might be this job might not be the right fit for you, but if you make that impression with an HR or the person who is recruiting, there can be any opening that is coming down the line. These people can remember you, and that might be an open door for you. So I think taking every opportunity and building those relationships is so super important, especially those who are looking for jobs. And again, coming to the relationship building, what are some of those things that you recommend students to do? Because sometimes for young students, asking for help is also difficult, right? So we have got some great tools all around us, and sometimes we were overwhelmed with what are those tools to use. I mean, we talk a lot about LinkedIn, and sometimes it can be overwhelming for people, because I mean, there are tons of folks who can help you, but you can get connected to hundreds of folks, but you still don't know who is that one person who is going to help you. And just asking for a recommendation wouldn't actually work. So what are some of those tips that you would tell, how to build those relationships that can really help students?
Yeah, I would say the first thing is to remember that relationships are built over time. So, if you meet somebody that you really admire, and you want them to be a mentor, it's not going to happen overnight. And it's going to take some work on your part, right? You're going to have to do the footwork of reaching out to that person, and if they've done something for you, making sure you're thanking them or following up with them. And I think right, you mentioned recommendations, that might be the end goal, but the place to start would be like, you know, do you have some time to talk about like your expertise or your experience? And really getting to know that person first, as well as like that, making sure that that person like really knows who you are at your core. So that way, when you need that recommendation, they can give you a genuine recommendation rather than something that is just generic or no recommendation at all. But the biggest thing I would say is like, again, like remembering that relationships like happen over time, and also being like really future focused and thinking about like the future, like now, even if you're not applying for a job, like starting to think like, who are those people I can start to build relationships with, or who are those people I already have relationships with that I might consider a mentor, that I might want to be a mentor for me. And again, like we mentioned earlier, like, right, breaking that down into like the smaller steps and thinking like, great, what's that first step I need to do? Maybe it's just sending them an email and asking for an informational interview so I can learn a little bit more about them and a little bit more about their profession.
Wow. Okay. That's awesome, because like again, building those relationships is super key, and it takes a lot of time, as you rightly mentioned. And sometimes we wanted those quick actions or quick things to happen, and it takes time. And I think building those relationships over a period of time, and like building again your personal brand, like making sure that people know you whenever there is an opening or an opportunity. People should know you to be able to refer you. So I think building those relationships is again very key, and it takes time. And there are lots of changes that are going through in the education space, especially after COVID-19. We have seen a lot of things that are going, especially in the higher education space. So what do you think, as someone who is seeing this transition just in a very short span of time? Where do you see the whole higher education is leaning towards in the next few years, and how is that going to impact the overall the education system, and especially for students and their careers?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like, right, like things are going more virtual. So I think there are some like advantages and disadvantages to that. Again, like being more virtual, like you can have a bigger reach. People who may have not been able to access that before now have access to it. But there is something that is lost in, like, right, like those not having that in-person interaction with folks. So I think I see like in the future, like, right, like after this is all over, like still some components of like the way that we're working now, where like, right, like if you can do some things like from home or online, like you'll continue to do that. And then integrating that with some in-person, like hands-on, like learning as well. So hopefully like fully or more fully enrich your like educational experience.
Wow. And again, we touched a little bit about finding the passion, and that has been the common problem for all of us. In fact, like going through an experience in college, and even after college, like 80 to 90% of us still don't know what to do next, and that has been a common problem and the challenge. So, what do you suggest students to kind of get exposure to, so that they can find out what they really are passionate about? Like, for example, in my case, like I didn't really know, even just like you, what I'm going to do for the rest of my career right out of college, and it took a little bit of time to really understand what I'm really passionate about. And sometimes it might take a lot of time, and getting exposure to a lot of things have really helped me in my career to get to where I am today. So what do you think for students who are just coming out of college to really focus on? Is it like getting exposure to a lot of different areas, or trying and testing to find out what their true passion is? What are some of those things that you often tell to students to really find out their passion?
Yeah, I think you kind of named it already, right? It's that exposure and really working with that student to just have those conversations about like, what are the things that they enjoy doing, and like thinking, are there ways in which they can turn that passion into their career? Or is there a way that they can, again, like think of the long-term plan, like, right? Like maybe their career is, again, like, or where they want to be in their career, I should say. Maybe that is 5 or 10 years away. So it's breaking that down into those smaller goals. And really the thing I encourage like all of the young folks is, if you're interested in something, give it a try. if there is a job that you think that you might get, but you're hesitant on it, just apply and see what happens. I think it's really all about kind of like taking that first step into something that may be interesting, but is a little different and can seem scary at first. But really finding the people also in your life that can push you to say like, no, you should try this. I think this would be good for you, or just confirming again. But again, really, I want to stress, what you said. I think it's exposure to a lot of different things. And it's also being okay with not liking something. So if you have a job and you absolutely hate it, that is a great piece of information. You know that you don't want to do that for the rest of your life. So I think it's remembering too that it's okay to be wrong. If you think you might like something and you don't, that is completely okay.
Wow, again, thanks for sharing that insight, and I really appreciate sharing these great insights because it's super important now more than ever to really find out that what their true passion is. And a lot of students are at home trying to seek their first opportunity, and it's very challenging to get that first opportunity this summer than ever before. And a lot of students are looking for internships, for jobs, just to get their foot in the door. So I think thanks for sharing all these great insights. And I just wanted to ask you, what keeps you motivated, Peter, every single day? You come across great stories, and you see students taking off, in their career. What motivates you in your job at Youth Job Center when you're dealing with a lot of students every single day?
Yeah, we kind of named it. I am really motivated just by the relationship that we build with our clients at the Youth Job Center. And it's really being able to share in their successes. I think especially those cases that can be a little more difficult, just in the fact that somebody's been applying for a job in a while for months and they haven't got anything, and then they finally land that job. It's sharing in that celebration, kind of knowing that you were there in that struggle with that person, and you kind of made it out to the other side. So really, again, just being motivated by getting to work with the young folks that we work with, and being able to share in their successes, right? The flip side of that is you have to share in the hard times as well, but when they celebrate with you, they really want to celebrate you, and it just feels great.
Wow, again, thanks for sharing those great insights and sharing your successes and failures, because sometimes it's very difficult when they are just looking for their first opportunity, and just giving that strength is super important. And I really appreciate your time today, for sharing a lot of great insights, and all the very best for all your endeavors at Youth Job Center, and helping lots of students. And where can our listeners connect with you if they wanted to reach out to you?
So I am on the CareerQuo platform. So you can look up Youth Job Center. I'm there under Peter Escobar.
Thank you so much, Peter, for taking your time today and talking with us, and all the very best.
Thank you. Same to you, Venki.
Yeah.